Parrots are the third most popular pet in the world, but the #1 most rehomed. Help us put an end to this. Listen to the Parrot Training Podcast, brought to you by BirdTricks. Hey everybody, and welcome to another session of the Parrot Training Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Womach.
And I'm Jamieleigh Womach.
And we are from BirdTricks.
So this week, I asked you guys in my YouTube community tab for some podcast topics, and you guys definitely delivered. So one of the questions that we were asked were, what are our opinions on cageless homes? So birds that are living without a cage in a home. And this is an interesting concept. At first, we were thinking about it from a different perspective, and then I realized it is actually something that I implement with project birds quite often, and most recently with Lefty and Touche. So Lefty was a 16-year-old Quaker parrot, and Touche was a 2-year-old Indian ringneck. And the reason that I was able to have them cageless was because they both lacked confidence in their environment. So obviously it was a brand new environment bringing them home. I had them for a few months, and I was able to keep them cageless almost the entire time. The only time I put them in an aviary was when we were going to be gone for an extended amount of time, and obviously there's no way to 100% bird-proof your home, which is what we'll kind of get into, and so I didn't want to risk anything happening while we weren't able to supervise them. So cageless is one thing when you're there to supervise, cageless is another when you're not. And I don't really have a lot of experience doing this just forever.
I also think it works until it doesn't, and we'll jump into that too, but I think really the bigger thing to look at this from is the whole like pet shaming that's happening, and where people are like, hey, you're a crappy bird owner if you don't let your bird out of the cage for X amount of hours every day. That's the wrong reason to let your bird out of the cage, because the reason, and we can jump into this, but you know, if you have a super confident bird, you might run into issues where your bird becomes very aggressive, and being out of the cage is no longer a good thing. It's actually similar to having a wild bird in your house and then you can't get him in the cage. And is your relationship with the bird better because he's cageless, or is it worse? Or is there no impact on your relationship? And I think that's kind of where a lot of that needs to be looked at too, because if you're approaching this from, you know, someone saying you need to have your bird out for a certain amount of time, it's not necessarily the right thing, where cageless can be really enriching for the bird.
Yeah, and I actually have a blog post on this. It's a blog article on our website at birdtricksstore.com. If you just use the little search feature and search cageless, I'll also put it in the video description, about some different people that we interviewed and talked to that actually do keep their birds cageless, and we've seen some amazing setups. Do you remember that one that was actually part of a rescue where her own birds were indoors, and she had literally used the entire wall of the upstairs and made this amazing jungle gym.
In Pittsburgh, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful and fantastic and amazing, and it was for macaws. Now the other thing is the personality in birds. So we have birds like COMET, who's our lazy boy. He will hang out. He's not very destructive as far as household things. He's very destructive in his aviary when he has his toys, but he's not super destructive just out. And he will be happily out on play stands for quite a while.
Most of the day.
Whereas our cockatoo, Bondi, she lasts like 0.2 seconds before she's on to something, and anything, whether it's negative attention or positive attention, she's all for it. So she'll start chewing on something just to get you to come over and, you know, make her stop, or to give her
just
attention.
Because she wants to chew on something.
Yeah.
It's really like having a galah in your house cageless would be foolish.
Oh, it would be awful.
I mean, you might as well like live in a cement box.
I would not live in the house.
Yeah.
I think it would be fine as long as you don't live in the house too.
Right. Well, that's the thing,
hand,
is, do you want to live in the bird's cage? Because that's what it is, right?
In the bird's house. Yeah. I think the other thing is it's easier, in my personal opinion, to have very small birds cageless, because one, they're way less destructive. Two, their poops are itty bitty tiny, and then they just get hard and you flick them off.
Totally something you said, boobs.
Boobs?
Yeah.
Instead of poops?
No, poops, okay.
Oh no, their boobs are itty bitty tiny.
Until you just flick them off.
Oh my God. This podcast, I'm sorry guys.
This is why it's a podcast, folks.
Apparently nobody understands me, not even my own husband. But anyways, I don't know where I was going with that, but just that little birds are easier to have cageless for larger amounts of time, in my opinion, with our birds, because they are less destructive and they're less, well, I wouldn't say they're less messy. They make a mess, but nothing compared to CRESSI, so I guess.
Oh my gosh.
Still
CRESSI cageless,
less.
there would be like
everything would be
food,
eaten.
slop, soup splattered everywhere, and
She would find everything to eat.
Yeah.
So I just think like it really comes down to, it would be a totally different story if we went through our entire flock and just said, what would it be like to have TUSA cageless? What would it be like to have JINX cageless? Oh man, no. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Going
some
down
would
the
be a
line.
disaster,
Some would
and
be a
then,
total disaster,
you know,
and
having-
others would be
having our
okay.
Budgie cageless is a joy. Like, he
Yeah.
just is...
It's fun.
He's fun. He just roams the house, and it's... I don't know. It's such a neat thing, but like you said, his poops are tiny, and he can just flick them away.
Oh my
I
gosh.
mean, there's no...
I think this is like a to each their own sort of thing. For me personally, I don't see how you would 100% parrot proof your home because there's paint, there's outlets, there's just normal things that build a home that a bird shouldn't be able to access that could really hurt it. So for me, I can't figure out a way that it would be okay. I do love the idea of a bird room where
Yeah.
it's not necessarily in a cage, but it actually has its own room, which makes its environment.
Ashland and David
enclosure.
have a phenomenal picture of this, and that's, you did a blog post on that, right?
Yeah, but the whole thing with them even, they still have a cage. So for sleeping, Tango still has a cage, but this is kind of a way for him to exert his energy and be able to destroy things. And he has like a full room for enrichment. So I love the idea of bird rooms. I think that's awesome. And if we could have our birds, how I always think about it is like cageless, but it's probably, you guys are gonna be like, that's not technically cageless, is a huge environment outside where it would be netted somehow in a way where it would be enclosed, but it's mostly enclosed to keep scary things out versus keeping them in. But you know what I mean? Like that's how it would act. So you'd walk in and not feel like you're enclosed in anything, but technically still an enclosure.
Well, and that's, you know, if you really look at it, your house is still
an
a
enclosure.
cage, right? Like, it's just not bars, so maybe it doesn't feel bad, but you're still keeping your bird in a cage. It just happens to be 2,000 square feet or whatever your house is, right? So the whole concept of a bird being cageless is really an interesting thing to interpret, because what you think is like, oh, this is great, but at the end of the day, you still have a wild bird in an enclosed area. So are you a better owner because it's not in its cage, or are you doing more damage because you're constantly having to correct behavior because he's eating the electrical cord or destroyed the lamp or your couch, and you've got to go over and
or ingested part of a blanket or a towel, you know, like that's where it gets really, for me, that's where it becomes just an ultimate safety issue. And so although you're trying to improve the quality of life, if the bird doesn't have a life, you've improved nothing. So you just need to be really, really mindful of how bird-proofed is your home. And speaking of which, we could add in the description our household dangers download, because there's a lot of stuff where people don't necessarily think of it. I was actually going back through it the other day, and we list, you know, safe and unsafe lists of foliage and branches, and it's in alphabetical order for those of us that really need that Parrot. But also it lists just household things that you may not think of, like certain cleaning supplies and certain things you use on your own body and all that kind of stuff that, you know, you probably aren't even thinking about with your bird, but need to be mindful of, especially if you're considering doing a cageless lifestyle. So overall, did we agree or disagree with a cageless lifestyle? I think it's just kind of a
I think it just comes down to a personal decision, because your house is still a cage. You just are living in it with your bird.
I like my cage.
And I like it not covered in poop.
Good thing you don't watch the other videos on the channel.
No, I've sat in your chair before. It's disgusting.
I don't know why they prefer the chair. So one of the epiphanies that epiphany? I want a different word. Can I buy a different vowel? Can I use a different word? It reminds me of the TV blooper where she's like, it's gonna rain. I was like, that's me. Oh, okay. Anyways,
I had a breakthrough idea.
I had a breakthrough idea of why a cageless lifestyle temporarily is really, really successful. So one of the things that I did with Lefty and Touche, as I mentioned, was I originally had them cageless, and that was to build confidence and encourage exploration. So they didn't have a cage to retreat into, to become territorial about. Any of the things that I always had read or had heard from other people having those sorts of species stemmed from having cage issues. And so I was like, well, if I eliminate the cage, I eliminate running into those issues. What I wish I would have done, for those of you on the YouTube channel, please go check out my series on Rasta. He was an Alexandrian parakeet, and he did this. He didn't want to come out of his cage. He didn't want to interact. He hated hands. And getting him to come out, I basically built an environment attached to his cage that expanded his boundaries of comfort in his comfort zone. And I slowly built that out. But what I kind of, looking back, what I wish I would have done is what I did with Lefty and Touche, and just had him cageless from the get-go. I wish I would have just set up a really cool environment play stand and had him out all the time, because I think it would have sped up his progress of his confidence building, of his flight skills, all the things I wanted to work on, even his telling me he wanted to interact. I think it would have sped everything up if I would have done the cageless thing.
Yeah, and looking back at Touche, we ended up changing his name to Torpedo because
we just called him Torpedo.
He got really, as he got more confident, he would torpedo over to us, crash land on the table, steal our steak, and fly away with it. We're like, dude!
That one time, he literally, it was so funny. We were not expecting it because, like I said, he didn't have confidence yet, and then just one day he did, which is why it comes back to Dave saying a cageless lifestyle is great and it works until it doesn't. And that was the day that it totally changed. And we were at the dining room table, which is where we're at now. He was all the way on the other side of the room. We didn't even think he could fly that far. And he flew all the way to the dining room table. We were laughing and we were astonished. We didn't think that he would go for our steak, and he literally took a chunk of steak and we were like, no! And before we could do anything, he just flew back with it. I mean,
so we're not advocating feeding your bird steak, by the way. Let's be crystal clear.
Yeah, no, that was not intentional.
But that's kind of one of the things with having your bird cageless, so to speak, is that as they build confidence, they're going to get into things that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Blueberry. He, like, when he wants to interact, he'd like, you,
or she.
It was the most, yeah, we don't know yet. But when one of the nights, because he sleeps out of the cage on the stand that you might be able to see behind us, there's behind Jamie's head, yep, on that stand. And so we're sleeping, and we just hear on our hardwood floors, we hear
pitter patter.
And he was like, all right, guys, I'm ready. And as he's building confidence, he's like telling us he wants to interact. He's telling us when he's hungry. And that communication is really great. And you see that the confidence is there, where if he was in a cage, he wouldn't be able to communicate that he needs something or wants something. And so, if that was a macaw, that could be a disaster. And it's just, I think it really comes down to what bird.
Yeah, well, even Touche and Lefty, I had stands everywhere. I have them in every room. And so they were able to move themselves to each and every room. And Touche, whenever I let him sleep in our master bedroom, I would always wake up with him on the bed. Always, always on the bed. It was hilarious. So there's a lot of opportunities for cute, and getting somewhere with training is when I use the cageless lifestyle to build confidence and like supercharge it so it happens faster. I really, really believe in it, and it's something that I like to utilize early on, and especially with project birds, because they're usually just lacking confidence and they're not acting like birds. And so it's a really great technique. I would almost call it a technique, like a training tool or technique that you can use and implement in a really good way, but it's not something that I would ever do as a long-term, forever, 24/7 lifestyle, for me personally.
Well said. Well, if you guys are getting value out of this, please help us with our mission of saving parrots one person at a time while Jamie checks her phone.
I was just going to see if we missed anything. If we should have said anything else. I knew you were going to say that I'm not paying attention, but anyways, I think it also goes back to our mission in the podcast where you mentioned, like, does your bird have too much freedom?
Yeah.
I think it's a great, like...
Yeah, that's a good reference to go back to that podcast and are you giving your bird too much freedom? And if you're getting value out of this, help us do our part by doing your part of sharing this with somebody who may or may not get value out of this, but that you hope they get value out of it.
Rolled. And let us know how you keep your bird. If you keep it in a bird room, if you keep it in a cage, if you keep it in your house, how you do it. I want to know, and I'd love to hear more about it.